The Judge Accountability Table is a group of organizations and volunteers that are committed and working towards ending mass incarceration as one of their primary purposes. Since Larry Krasner was elected district attorney, he ran on the platform to end cash bail, promote more compassionate sentencing, and abolish the death penalty. But since he was elected, there have been a lot of things to highlight as victories, but also many, many challenges. And we have partnered with JAT to help them better understand the current landscape through data. So our goals for this Datathon over the past 6 weeks were to help JAT explore and visualize some complex dockets data from the Philadelphia courts, examine the concept, and it's a tricky concept, of judge harshness and ways to quantify it, and understand systemic trends in relation to Larry Krasner's election, but not just. So you will see findings related to each of these areas in the coming presentations. But at the same time, we also wanted this Datathon to be about our members. So we really wanted everyone to have the opportunity to analyze data that's real, large, and complex, difficult to manage. We wanted everyone to gain experience working with data science tools, things like R, Git, Shiny, and so on. Collaborate across industries and level of experience, and work towards producing some deliverables that our members can be proud of and that also capture the work that was done and will provide useful insights to our partner. So this is the very broad level overview of what we were trying to accomplish with this Datathon. And without further ado, we will start with team 1 that was focusing on exploring and visualizing complex docket data. So I will give the control over to Roy, and Roy can tell us a little bit about what team 1 has put together for us.
Sure, thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Roy Eisen. I was on team 1 along with all the folks you see listed there on the right. And well, the first thing to cover, I actually missed the kickoff and I didn't quite catch up, but I do know that our objective when we set out was to visualize judicial patterns at various levels of abstraction and create an interactive dashboard. So pretty broad objective to start, but where we've landed essentially is we do have an interactive dashboard where you can explore the data, it enables someone to dive into specific questions that they might have. Some of the visualizations focused on sentencing patterns by judge, by race, bail increases or decreases by judge, other patterns in bail, and that's not an exhaustive list. There was plenty of other things that we looked at, and we'll see a couple of examples of those visualizations and analyses in a moment. And something else I wanted to highlight is when we were thinking about what this dashboard looks like, and in addition to that, what some of our analyses, what some of the important analyses we could do might require, we thought about incorporating things like potentially judges' social media feeds, if any of them are active on social media, census information. We thought that would be valuable for some of the analyses we're interested in, sentencing guidelines, data from neighboring jurisdictions, and also, you know, we came across research reports as we started digging into this space and found that that could potentially be something that we want to loop in. And if anyone's, you know, looking at this dashboard and wants additional reading or additional context, we might want to sort of curate other resources like that. So those were some things that we considered. They're not all implemented, but there were some things that got us thinking about what this looks like after this point. So with that, I'll pass it over to June, who's going to talk about the dashboard, and then we're going to look at some of the work that we all did individually for some of the analyses we did.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. So our team built a Shiny app to showcase the visualizations, as you can see in the short video to the left. It was mainly built using the packages Shiny Dashboard and Shiny Dashboard Plus, along with several others. We had a lot of information that we wanted to showcase. So our team decided to design the layout such that the user can first pick the data set that they want to explore from the sidebar to the left, and then pick a visualization that they want to see about that data set from the tab panels at the top. So this created a nice hierarchical structure that the user can navigate through. One thing that we spent some time considering is how to minimize the amount of calculations we do on the data because the data was so huge. And we ended up taking a modular approach to that problem, such that we imported pre-processed data sets underlying each plot or each set of plots. So a lot of the interactivity can just boil down to filtering of the data. There were also some big picture visualization considerations in the design of the dashboard. So to standardize the overall look of the various plots that we each individually contributed, we used RStudio's new thematic package to keep fonts and graphical element sizes as consistent as possible across the plots. We also spent a lot of time thinking about how much freedom should be given to the user in exploring each plot, and when we should visualize the data with the plot versus just make the whole data available with the table. And this kind of sounds very abstract now, but I'm now going to pass it off to other members of the team who's going to go into detail about how they approach these problems for the plot that they individually contributed.
Hi, I'm Allison. Thanks for the intro to our team, June. So as June mentioned, a lot of the consideration that went into this was how much freedom to give to the user. So one of the approaches I went with was giving the user a lot of freedom, and basically to ask, how do judges compare in their sentencing of crimes? Is there bias on a type of crime? Is there race correlation, something else? So this plot shows the judges on the x-axis and the sentencing is on the y-axis, and it allows you on the sidebar to basically customize a lot of different things, whether which judges you might want to look at if you want to filter for a certain keyword or type of crime, certain disposition method, if you want to look at specific races or grades, and just a lot of different ways to look at it, and also to separate along the x-axis for to highlight something. So for example, in this case, I said I only wanted to look at crimes related to assault. I only picked 2 judges to compare against all others. I only wanted to look at felonies, which you can see in like the grade bar, and I separated it by race. So this is just one way to sort of start visualizing this data, giving the user a lot of freedom based off of what they were looking for.
Okay, this is Alice. So Allison and I kind of teamed up on sentencing data. And one thing that I was interested in is also the kind of concept of how does one judge compare to other judges? And I was somewhat inspired by this Philadelphia Inquirer article that I pulled from on the left here, which looked at one judge, Ray Means, and how he sentenced for a specific crime, which was retail theft. And so in the dashboard, we created an element where you could do this, where you could select a single judge. And here I kind of tried to recreate their analysis. You could select a judge and then compare that judge to other judges. And you could filter and look at not only the sentence types, but then also roughly the sentence durations as far as the minimum and the maximum sentences. Okay,
Hi, so my name is Kulbir, and I worked with this amazing team for the Shiny app. And for my part, what I was interested in looking at was the different sentencing for the same offenses, and was it based on the defendant's race. So my plot shows that for similar offenses, there was some differences in the sentencing. I have for now looked only at 2 races for this visualization, but we could add other races from the data to further look into the divisions of the sentencing and the race bias in it. And we could go to the next slide.
All right, so jumping back in here, one of the questions I was most interested in was essentially looking at bail amounts and asking how do judges compare in their tendency either to increase or decrease bail amounts. And so what this is showing here is essentially every time a judge, there was a record of them increasing the bail amount, they got say +1. Every time they decreased it, -1. And adding it all up, that's what these bars are showing. So on the x-axis is judges, and on the y-axis is essentially the net change as a function of that +1, -1 in bail amount. So if a bar extends above 0, that means that a judge more often than not increased bail amounts rather than decreasing it. And if it extends below 0, it means that more often than not, they decrease bail amounts. There's also, you can hover over this and actually see the values or which judge it is. There's also another view where you can filter down to a subset of judges or just to one judge if that was of interest. And the glaringly obvious thing here is that there's this pretty severe tendency to decrease more often than increase, which is, I would think, what we want to see when we're trying to end cash bail. So that's nice to see, but it also is potentially really powerful for seeing how a judge really behaves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sybil. Just diving a little bit more deeply into that topic of bail increases. If you saw on the last slide, you saw like one of the lowest points for bail increases and decreases was by Judge Rayford Means. So I went ahead and tried to look at this a little more deeply. So here in this graph, what you're looking at is a chart of his bail increases and decreases by race over the data collected for the years for Judge Rayford Means. And you can see a lot of the bail information by race is particularly for African Americans and whites. But so as you see over time at the top, you see this is 7-8 years that more bail information has been incorporated into this data, and it's been increasing. And if you click again, I decided to take a look a little bit deeper into the Black bail increases and decreases. And if you kind of smush your face a little close to that screen, you can kind of see the tooltip where it's kind of displaying some of the bail increase, the counts per defendant ID for that race. So you could kind of dive in a little bit more and kind of taking a look at, okay, so these are defendants who have had a count bail decrease there for 32 times for this one defendant and 35 times increase for this defendant. So you could kind of take a look a little bit more into understanding, okay, he's decreasing bail amounts, he's increasing bail amounts for this rate, and why is he doing it so much for this particular defendant? But when you take a look at this chart and just look at the numbers here, Rayford Means has had a total of 14,527 bail increase and decrease over the years that he's been here. And the total increase in bail amount for race, just Black, has been 3,849. And for decreases has been 7,409. And for all other races, the bail amount increase has been 1,262 and decrease has been 2,007. So what you're seeing here is that there's been a lot of bail increases and decrease information for Blacks as opposed to all other races. And that kind of, this visualization kind of gets you to want to dive more and ask more questions, well, why that is, and specifically looking at some of these defendants a little bit closely to see what's going on there.
Cool, thanks, Sybil. So starting to wrap up a little bit, we wanted to highlight some of the questions or things we wanted to look at but weren't able to or didn't quite get around to. So patterns in leveraging alternatives to prison sentences is something we considered. So if, for example, we could find in the data that there were patterns where some judges are sentencing for rehabilitation programs, patterns in probationary period lengths. We thought there was more to explore with the bail data that we didn't quite get to. Also relationships between sentencing for cases that did or didn't go to trial. And then lastly, I'm a user experience researcher. So a couple weeks in, I started kind of wondering, along with the rest of the team, if how to make this dashboard usable for our target users, but also a little more broadly, were we building out the visualizations that users need or desire? And I think that's something, all of these are things that we can potentially explore in the future. And oops, that skipped one. So takeaways for this group here. One, of course, the team's work that we're about to see in a moment for teams 2 and 3 could be integrated into this dashboard potentially. Any of the visualizations that are currently in the current implementation of the dashboard could be modified or expanded on if potentially someone sees it and thinks, well, if this other dimension was worked into it, it'd be really valuable for me. And then I think at least 3 of the team members who worked a lot on the dashboard can attest to creating dashboards being an art. There's themes to consider, there's consistency in organization. In the last couple weeks, we did provide sort of feedback in our weekly meetings and in other formats. And we did, as June mentioned, use the Shiny package and the Shiny dashboard packages. And last thing to highlight, some of the challenges, some of which we solved a little bit, some of which we didn't, and I'm sure other teams dealt with them a little. Accounting for merged sentences in analyzing sentence lengths was difficult. It was hard to understand whether to tease them out or if it was possible to tease out sentence lengths based on merged sentences or what to do with that data. Accounting for which seat judges were appointed to. So of course, some judges can sit in different courts. They might see very different cases in that case or different volume. So thinking about how that impacts our data and our visualizations. Whether to consider each offense and sentence individually or at the docket level was something we struggled with along the way. And then as June mentioned, working with a large data set in a Shiny app was something we had to figure out a solution for. And Sybil and I can definitely speak to the last one where we felt like we were studying for law school when we were trying to understand all the information in the bail action data set. We did a lot of Googling and we understand a lot more now, but it was difficult. And that just about wraps it up for our team. I think we might have a second if anyone on the team wants to add anything, but otherwise we could just jump into questions.
All right, that's a lot of work. You put in a lot of work. That looks absolutely amazing. So I want to let JET representatives, I think we have a couple of people here from JET, ask some questions first, and then I see we have a list of questions from participants. So we will jump into that after we let JET people ask some questions. Let's see. Joy or Rebecca, any questions from you?
First, thank you. This looks incredible, and this is going to be extremely helpful. My question is sort of not very complicated, but is the idea that this would, will we be able to make this available to our members and maybe eventually to the public, and sort of what would you need from us, I guess, like website hosting or other kind of capacity from us to make that possible? Because people are going to be very eager to get their hands on this, I think.
I might turn that over to Alice. I think Alice might have thought the most about this part of it.
Yeah, I think it would be, depending on where we would want to host it, it would be pretty straightforward. Like right now we have it hosted kind of on a demo version, you know, that I posted on this Shiny app server, but there's definitely a possibility that we could host it in that way from the RLadies official account, either with a free account or a paid account. And there's possibilities to also host it in a different way if you wanted it to map to a nice URL or something like that. I think one of our goals here was just to show kind of a range of possibilities for interactivity with the data. Right now, it is kind of a smorgasbord if you go to the app and you can play around and see things, but maybe it gives you an idea of the range of the things that could be possible. And then you could create kind of a final version of that, and it could be hosted, yeah, either to the public or at some kind of internal site.
Cool, thank you. Let's follow up about that. That sounds great.
Any other questions from Jet?
This is Joy. Let me turn my video on to be a little bit more personable. Hello. I am curious to hear what was surprising. So I saw there were a couple of people who presented stuff and they said, oh, I wanted to dig down into this more, right? Because something, you know, piqued your interest. But was there anything that surprised you, dismayed you, gave you a sense of relief? Just what were your sort of justice takeaways?
I'll answer first and quickly. The one plot I showed showing net changes in bail amounts, I mean, to me, it was a positive thing to see that the trend is to decrease it, because that's the direction we're trying to move in, and not just decrease, but completely do away with it. but I thought that was good to see. I mean, I really dug in. I read some other articles and I really became very disillusioned with the idea of bail. And I was like, this is horrible. So seeing that pattern, I thought was actually pretty great. But at the same time, it just made me think, you know, how do we advocate for doing more than just decreasing it?
I think for me, this is like sort of basic, but just realizing how complicated all of it is. Like I knew that already, but like seeing how complicated it all is, and especially I guess that was like why we were doing this, is trying to categorize it and like work with this data to make it in a format that you could properly interpret it was so mind-boggling. So it was really fun to work with. I'm used to like working with biological expression data, so this was a totally new thing, but I think just that like level of depth to all of this, and like we made this dashboard hoping that it could be useful, but I feel like it also, as we were making it, it really, at least for me, drove home that you would need to know what you were looking for to get proper information out of it, just because there's so much to it.
And just to kind of jump on what Roy was saying before, like with just looking at the bail and noticing that positive decrease, and that was great, but even diving into it a little bit more, and you're looking at where it lies race-wise, you know, there's that negative, well, you know, it kind of seems like there's a disproportionate amount of African Americans that continue to, that within that data that seem to be, you know, going to jail more often, and having to be able to get bail, and get bail decreases several times, you know. So it's like, are they noticing that the bail is too high the first time? Like, why did one person have a bail decrease 32 times? Granted, it could be for different offenses and whatnot, but it's something that, you know, you start to ask a lot more questions about the justice system, and like who are we putting there, like who's being put in jail more often for offenses.
Definitely, Sybil. And I think maybe we could like look back, or maybe one of the other teams has done this, at the bail magistrate data, or I think some of the bail funds, and like just try to understand whether that relates to the initial bail decision, that like white people are being released at the jump more often, and it's the people of color and Black folks that are having to come back multiple times on bail in front of judges. So that's super important to know.
We have a couple of questions here from participants too. So team one, would the judge's net decrease or increase bail be affected by how many dockets a judge is involved in? Would it make sense to scale these values?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by scaling them, or I guess I have an idea. I would say it's definitely got its flaws, this visualization, in that we do need to kind of do our due diligence and check to see that if it's the same docket and we're logging it, and they're logging it as a bail decrease 5 times because there's 5 different offenses in that docket, and we think that should actually just be counted as one, then yeah, we need to take that into account. And that's not currently the case with the visualization. So I think that's a good question, and that's definitely something that needs to be addressed with that plot.
Got it. And then more on a collaborative side, how did you collaborate each part of each member's work on Git? It looks like the products produced are individuated. So what was your collaboration on Git like?
Maybe I want to say, actually take this opportunity to thank Roy, who was kind of our unofficial project manager. He kept us, incredible job from Roy to organize us as far as taking notes and coming up with kind of like how we would be organized. As far as collaborating on Git, I think we did a great job. This was super fun, where we all were able to work together, and we sort of took an approach to, people sort of started with their individual parts and then put their code in our shared, I think we used my forked repo. And then we took that, and then we were able to make suggestions on each other's work. And then we created a separate one for the dashboard, where we sort of delegated to take the code that people had created individually and merge it into that one dashboard. So we did have a little bit of a division of labor, in that we split up the projects into things that people were particularly personally interested in. And then the collaborating using Git was really I think it worked really well. I don't know if other people want to comment who had less experience using Git, if it was a positive experience or not.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot. I mean, me and Alice were going back and forth with a lot of that, but I feel like it worked well just to like all be collaborators on one Git and like push and pull as we needed. But yeah, it was definitely fun to learn more about it. I was definitely not as familiar with Git in general, and at least feel more so now. So, and yeah, absolutely second, Roy definitely like was so crucial to just all of the organization that we did. It was much appreciated.
Yes, good job, Roy. Thank you so much for that, because I was not doing that at all.
Thank you. That was me making up for getting scared off by Git and not using Git. I was the only one who didn't. So I was like, I got to do something else.
You got to jump on it, Roy. All right. One last question. It seems like everyone worked on one part of the whole. How did you determine who worked on what part? Was this, Roy, your doing, or did everyone just kind of choose what they wanted to work on?
It wasn't fully my doing. I mean, I think I might have maybe been the person asking kind of when should we split this up earliest. I think we all...
I feel like the first couple of weeks, it was obviously, as I'm sure the other teams know too, it took a while to just get familiar with the data. So the first week or two, we just spent a lot of time trying to like clean certain aspects of the data. And it sort of just got to be like people had ended up focusing on different things or were interested in different things or had spent way more time trying to clean one aspect or another. So it kind of just ended up into like what we were interested in. And then there was definitely some input of like, okay, like maybe we should split this up with two people or somebody else needs to pivot to this. But we kind of just started with familiarizing and just kind of went from there, and it worked out well. I don't think there was a ton of overlap as far as like what we were like, we didn't end up duplicating each other, which was good.
Yeah, you covered a lot of ground. It's really, really impressive, and thank you for all your work on this. It sounds like there's going to be some follow-up from Jats, so hopefully we can continue to work on this and help them out and put together a really nice public dashboard. All right, let's go and see what Team 2 has found. So we are 6:40, so I will give the speaker or the controls over to Jaeyeon.
Yes, that'll be great.
And Jaeyeon, you can take it from here.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jaeyeon, and I'm on Team 2 with these fantastic members. Yes, we have a very big team. And our task was to look at judge harshness. So in a nutshell, we took two approaches. So first being relatively simple. So we just visualized sentencing patterns. We looked at how long the prison sentences were on average by judge and by the crime type. And then the second one that Shanti took is a random coefficient model. After I'm done explaining the first approach, Shanti will explain in a few minutes her approach on the modeling. So before we even got to making the graphs, first we had to agree on what harshness exactly is, because it's such a subjective concept and there are so many different ways to look at harshness. So what I settled on were two metrics. So I wanted to look at how long the prison sentences were by each crime type and by judge. And the second one I considered was how often the judges sentence someone to prison as opposed to probation. So for the first metric, I looked at the box plot to look at the distribution of sentencing. And for the second one, I looked at a bar chart to compare the frequency. For the visualization, I tried to narrow down the data slightly. First, because I didn't want a very crowded box plot with over 100 judges, and also because I wanted to focus more on the judges who are currently serving Philadelphia County, because they're the ones who are part of the justice system today, and they're the ones who have impact on people's lives. Lastly, I also tried to narrow down on the different crimes. So I looked at the top 5 most common charges, which were manufacture, delivery, and possession. So something drug related, as well as aggravated assault, conspiracy to manufacture, deliver, and possess drugs, simple assault, and lastly, firearms not to be carried without a license. In addition, I also looked at sentencing patterns by misdemeanors by degree and felonies by degree. The reason why I wanted to look at the crimes by degree was I wanted to take into account the fact that some judges might have tougher cases to begin with that would warrant longer sentences, tougher sentences. So I tried to account for discrepancy by trying to control, trying to be as specific about the crime type as much as possible. So here is the first one, example of the first one I have. So this is a box plot that I made for manufacture, delivery, and possession. Because I chose this one because this is by far the most common charge. And overall, I mean, of course, there were slight differences, but a lot of the box plots showed that Judge Coyle in particular, she tended to order longer than average sentences. And then there were other judges like Judge Cunningham and Judge Bronson. Some, there were a couple of judges who tended to order longer sentencing, but I think this tendency to order longer sentences was most pronounced in Judge Coyle. And then here's another type that we looked at. I tried to map which judges were most likely to sentence someone to prison as opposed to probation. So generally, some judges who were more likely to sentence defendants to prison were Judges Bronson, Coyle again, and Judge Schulman. And then on the other hand, we also had a few judges who were quite lenient as well. On the other side of the scale, I saw that usually Judges Coleman, Judge Sawyer, and Judge Tsai, they tended to order probation rather than prison, and they also tended to have shorter sentences too. So these are the visualizations I looked at, and of course I understand that these are just some of the ways to look at harshness. I could have looked at bail, the amount of bail set like team 1, but these are the ones I focused on. And now I'm going to hand over the mic to Shanti so that she can talk about her random coefficient model.
Thank you, Jayon.
Thank you.
Let me see. Whoops. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Shanti, and this second approach, random coefficient models, is the approach that all members of Team 2 had discussed about since the first week until the 6th week of this event. Actually, many of the ideas for this approach were brought into the team discussion in the first 3 to 4 weeks. And just like Team 1, we actually also struggle a lot between a sentence or docket as the unit of our analysis. We also got a headache about the merge sentence type, and for that reason we decided to go for now with the unit analysis of docket. And the matrix that we use to examine a judge harshness is days of confinement. So for an offense, if the type of sentence that offense receive is a confinement, it's going to have that offense will have a certain values on the days of confinement. But if the offense receive a different sentence type, for example, probation, IPP, merge, or no further penalties, the value of days of confinement for that offense will be 0. We focus only on dockets filed in year 2010 until 2019. One reason was raised in our team discussion was a concern that last year, 2020, was so unusual because of the pandemic. And for our purpose, we focused on dockets that are done. So we only include dockets whose status are closed or adjudicated. We exclude ongoing cases where the docket status is active or inactive. So our kind of like final data subset, if you will, that we will later fit the model consists of 176,000 dockets and a total of 186 judges. Oops, let me see. Okay. Oh, okay. For the outcome variables, so the sentencing data is at the offense level or the crime level, but our chosen unit of analysis is at the docket level. So we needed to aggregate this information from offense level into docket level. Ideally, we would have information on whether a sentence, whether sentences were carried out concurrently or consecutively, but we do not have that information. So what we did was we created two different outcome variables. One is the total days of confinement. So these total days of confinement, we essentially just sum up the days of confinement of sentences within a docket. So with this variable, we kind of treat it as if sentences within a docket were carried out consecutively. Another outcome variable is maximum days of confinement. So in this variable, it's essentially the maximum days of confinement of sentences within a docket. With this variable, we treat it as if the sentences were carried out concurrently. For the covariates, we include defendant-related covariates. For example, whether the defendant of that docket is male or female. We include race, we include age. We also include the number of prior dockets. So if the docket is the first docket of that defendant, then the number of prior dockets is 0. If that docket is the second docket of that particular defendant, then the number of prior dockets would be 1, and so on. And I guess mentioned also by Team 1, one of the things that makes it tricky to assess judge harshness is that judges, they work on different kind of cases. Some judges may work on cases that consist of severe offenses. Other judges may work on cases that contain not too severe offenses. So for a more fair comparison among judges, we take into account the offense grades. So what we did was that for each of grade offense, we count the number of offenses within that docket that falls within that particular grade. So for example, here we have for a docket, for all dockets, the number of grade F1 offenses within the docket, the number of grade 2 offenses for that docket, and so on and so forth for all grade offenses. We also include indicator whether the docket has been adjudicated at a type of a court type, and we also include as a covariate year and month. Let me see for the next slide. Okay, I'm sorry for the layout. I guess there was an issue when we inserted the slides. So the title of this slide is supposed to be model specification. So random coefficient models are also known by several other names, including multi-level models, mixed effects model, hierarchical linear models. So in this project, we specify a simple model. Here, I denotes a docket, and J denotes judge. So if we look at the level 1 equation, the top one, what we have here is an outcome variable Y for a particular observation, in our case, docket, nested under cluster, in our case, judge. In our simple specification, the random coefficient is the intercept. And if we look at the level 2 equation, here we have the random effect U sub 0j, and this random effect U sub 0j allows each judge to have a unique intercept. So in our context, the higher value of the intercepts means the longer confinement sentences, and that means we take it as that it's a harsher judge. We ran 2 models, one with the outcome variables, total days of confinement, and another one with the outcome variable, maximum days of confinement. For both models, we include all the covariates mentioned in the earlier slides. And for each model, we get the estimates of the random effect on the intercept for each judge. So we get the U sub O for each of the judge. So the higher the random effect on intercept for a judge, the higher the values of intercept for the judge, which means the longer confinement sentences, and we take that as a harsher judge.
Santi, I'm just going to jump in here.
Yeah.
You only have a couple of minutes left, so
okay.
3 minutes or so for
okay.
the remaining slides.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so going back to the goal of our team, are some judges harsher than others? Here we see the distribution of random effects on intercept of judges. We see here that the distribution is a unimodal, skewed to the right. So here we see that many judges are less harsh than others. Some judges are harsher than others, but we see like a few judges here on the right tails are much harsher than others. This is the outcome variable is total days of confinement, but if we run with outcome variable maximum days of confinement, we get the similar pattern. It seems here that if we ask, are some judges harsher than others, we may have some suggestive indication that some judges are harsher than others, and a few are much harsher than others. So yeah, but this is a work in progress. There are a couple of things that Team 2 still needs to do, including a careful diagnostic of the residuals. But in conclusion, we thank you so much to RLadies Philadelphia and Judd for the opportunity to work with and learn from this wonderful data set.
Thank you. This is amazing. I'm fascinated. I think this is really interesting, and I would love to hear more. So it's unfortunate we only have a few minutes. I want to open it up to Jet and see if there are any questions before we jump into questions from participants. Joy, Rebecca, anyone else? Please go ahead.
My one question would be, this is awesome. Thank you again. Do you have ideas, anyone on the team, about how we would like communicate, well, we can give these results to people, but like how we can say in a way that is easy for people to understand, like how we came out with this this result, because I honestly didn't understand that super well, the modeling aspect of it. And we could think about that more, but just was curious if anyone had thoughts.
Sorry, never mind me tinkering.
Hey, I wanted to make sure Shanti didn't want to answer that one. I helped a little bit with this data, and since this is a random intercepts model, I won't bog you into the statistical details, but a good way to interpret this result, since the outcome is number of days of prison, what we can say from this is, you know, for a given judge, when we pull out their intercept, we can say, when you control for all of the factors that we looked at, and you know, there are things like the defendant's race and the severity of the crime and et cetera. But when you control for these factors, then this judge has an average sentence that's this many days longer than the average. And in some cases, that's, you know, 4,000 days, it's many years. So
Yeah.
Like Shanti said, we still have a little bit to do to, you know, really pin things down and make sure our model's behaving well and everything. But I think that even though this is kind of a complicated model, it is still something that can be interpretable.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you.
To help Rebecca out from a UI UX perspective, is there a way for you guys to code in a sample judge that is harsher and one that is less harsh, and to show from that data that you have aggregated where they lie in respect to the range that you have established? And I think having that visualization as a sample to provide for others who are looking at the dashboard would help them determine where the real judges lie within that spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, so we can we can get the from the value of the random effects of the judge, we can sort them. So actually we can take a look like who are these judges behind like this kind of dots. So yeah, so if we would like to kind of show like who are the judges on the kind of top quartile among all the judges, we will be able to do that. Or judges who are like less harsh compared to others on the bottom quartile, for example, we would be able to kind of pull their names. Yeah.
Yeah. Also answering for the box plots and the bar charts I made. I forgot to address this, but there is the dotted blue line that shows what the mean sentencing period is for every type of crime, every type of charge, and same for the bar chart as well. It shows like the average frequency, so that should be able to give an idea of which judges are on the harsher side and which judges tend to be more lenient. Yeah, so you can see near the usually near the center of the box plots, you can see the blue line running down, and that's supposed to represent the mean period of how long the sentences are on average.
This is Joy, and I also had some questions about the model, and I think I would have to sort of dig in a little bit and dust off some of my stats. But I was curious about sort of interaction effects as well, because and also how you arrived at the subset of, I think it was like 47 factors, and if you discovered that there was some collinearity among some of the factors, or interaction effects, like would it make sense to have a somewhat impoverished or simplified model, or did you find that really all of those factors were important? Hopefully that question makes sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a great question. So right now, I think it's great to actually fine tune the model, if you will, like seeing whether there is like interaction. Right now we have not, so it's just like a simple linear form. And so the number of 47 is actually it was because we counted like we kind of that numbers comes because we kind of like open up the factor variables and becomes a dummy variable. Yeah, but actually the number of variables itself are not like 47. But for example, the year we have, or month, we have like 12 months, then it becomes 11 dummy. That's why it's add up to 47. Yeah, but yeah, good point. Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of questions from participants here. We have a lot of questions from participants. I'm going to ask a few and then we'll have a more in-depth discussion afterwards. Let's see. What additional things did you discover that may be characteristic of judges that are more lenient or more harsh? I know you only presented a small subset of it, but as you were digging into it, what did you discover?
Well, this is a generalization, but I guess one positive thing I saw was that I think younger and more recently elected judges tend to be more lenient. So I think that could indicate like a trend in the justice system that rather than just, slapping on like the longest possible sentence, judges are becoming more lenient.
That's really, really interesting. That's awesome. All right, let's see. Shanti, were there other predictive models to choose from? Why did you choose the random coefficient model over those?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. This is not like the only way to go. It will be interesting to see other. This is the one that was mentioned quite often in our teams, but in our team discussion, and it does have some advantages. For example, because we treat a judge as a cluster with a random effect approach, the result isn't as sensitive if some of the judges only handles a few cases, for example. So it's not sensitive to kind of like the number of observation within a cluster, but absolutely it will be very interesting actually to also try another approach, even like the simple fixed effects approach, because although random effect has an advantage, the assumption is that the grouping, the random effect is uncorrelated with the covariates. So if we are interested to know, for example, once we have the judge effect, whether it correlates with the other inputs, like with race, with gender, by construction, because we use random effect model, we wouldn't be able to tease anything interesting. But if we want to see, for example, possible bias, we would be able to do that if we were to do a simple fixed effect model. And yeah, I mean, I think this is a super interesting data set that other approach can also be considered. Or for example, one could think about using like random forest, for example, and predicts the length of days of confinement, and then apply like shape values, I don't know, like and see with the contribution of a judge to the prediction. So yeah, so I hope that answers. In short, this is the approach that our team kind of often discuss in our team meetings. That said, there are many other approaches that will be interesting to try. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you. And we do have a few more questions, but we'll leave those for the end. So I want to say a huge thank you for tackling this question. I know it's not an easy question, and your team did a phenomenal job. So thank you so much for doing all this work. And all right, so we will take a quick break now. I think just grab a drink or something. We'll be back in 5 minutes. I will set up a timer here, share it on the screen, and we'll all be back in 5 minutes with Team 3. We are back. Let me see if I can share the presentation again. There we go. We are back with team 3, so I will give the floor over to Nathan. And we can dive right in. Nathan, are you here?
Yeah.
Are you back?
Yeah, I think I just got the controls for the screen.
Wonderful.
Just check.
All right, go for it.
All right, so we were really excited to tackle systemic trends, especially as Larry Krasner took office in 2018. So there was a lot of people that worked on this project in Team 3, so we'll just jump right in. So the main goal was to examine how things have changed in the courts since Larry Krasner took office. He took office in January 2018, and because we didn't want to include, like Team 2 mentioned, the pandemic year, we just restricted our analysis to the 2 years before he took office and the 2 years after he took office. And we looked at most of these things at a docket level. Some of the challenges that we faced throughout our project was there was a lot of missing values for offenses, grade, and outcome. We couldn't determine the order of judges that they were assigned as the docket went through. There also wasn't any ethnicity data to let us know if any of the defendants were Hispanic or Latino. And also, like was previously mentioned, there was no indication of whether these were concurrent or consecutive sentences. So a lot of our exploration and analyses were based on a lot of the campaign promises that Krasner made. So a lot of the promise focused on lowering the rates of ROR, increasing the rates of ROR so that these defendants don't have to wait in jail until their court hearing. So here on the left side, we have the ROR rate, and we have it grouped by white and Black individuals, as these were the most abundant data sets, or the numbers per group. And then all of the before text will be the 2 years before he took office, and the after will be 2 years after. So as you can see here, the ROR rate, there is a difference here that we observed. And if you plot that by the difference, so if we take the rate of ROR for white defendants minus the ROR of Black defendants, and we compare before and after. So this example here on the left, the difference does decrease, but there's still a difference between white and Black individuals. We see this was misdemeanors of the first degree, also other misdemeanors of the lowest grade. We saw the most striking change from before and after in this felony of the first degree, where it almost normalizes down to about an even rate. But a lot of these don't really change over time. And one of our team members looked at the odds ratio to compare, for example, if there were 100 white defendants that received ROR, how many represented or how many Black defendants would be predicted. And here we have this 65% odds ratio, which does increase after Larry Krasner takes office to 72. But obviously there's still room to improve here. So that was looking at the ROR. We next wanted to look at any changes in minimum bail set per docket. So here we've arranged the misdemeanors here on the left, and increasing severity, as well as the felonies here on the right again. So this is minimum bail that we're plotting, again, before and after. So what you can appreciate right away is that the minimum bail will increase as you increase the severity of the felony or misdemeanor. What was really interesting that we noticed was we do see some changes or some differences between Black and white individuals within these categories. And the most striking was in this first-degree felony here on the right, where before Larry Krasner took office, we saw around 250,000 was the mean minimum bail. And then for white individuals, it was under 200,000. But after he takes office, the comparison is more on an even playing field. That being said, there are some differences that still exist, and this might not look like a lot compared to the first-degree felony, but this is thousands of dollars here. So the next thing that our team was interested in, the office campaigned on seeking maximum sentences for felonies and misdemeanors. So he wanted to set a maximum of 3 years for felonies and 12 months for misdemeanors. So the felonies here are on the left-hand side of the slide, and this green vertical line represents that 3-year mark. And then comparing before he took office in purple to after in orange, you can see that the median or means will switch and will decrease after he takes office. And most of them will be kind of at that line. So obviously there's still individuals that are above this maximum sentencing line. However, this was 2 years, and it would be interesting to see if this trend continues. Now looking on the right side of the slide, misdemeanors, he wanted to have the 12-month maximum. And you can see a lot of these didn't necessarily change, like the first-degree misdemeanor and then the lowest grade misdemeanor, but we did see the improvements in the felony max sentences. And then another thing that we wanted to dig into the data and explore was he platformed on reforming the bail policy around different statute or different types of crimes. So the ones in particular he wanted to focus on was changing the small amounts of marijuana possession, retail theft, and prostitution. So how we organized this was we took all of the dockets and we looked at which percentage each statute was represented. And we looked at the change after he took office to before. So everything that's positive and above 0 is change in percent of dockets that increases after he takes office. Whereas on the left-hand side, anything that's negative is something that decreased when he took office, so the 2 years after to before. And what we can notice is that retail theft, prostitution are among the statutes that decrease over time. And the magnitude is kind of lost on this plot because it's just the difference, but I put here for a couple of them, retail theft actually decreased 4.5 times in this docket, 3.5 times decrease for prostitution, and so on. As far as the proportion of dockets that increased, the statute categories were things like simple assault, strangulation, and so on. And we kind of chatted about this amongst ourselves, and it's kind of hard to tell if this is a reprioritization of which charges or which dockets the judges are pursuing, or if there were more of these instances, in Philadelphia. And I'll just do a quick shout out to Jake. He made this package that inspired the data visualization here. It's called Variation. Where is the variation? And it really helps you get a quick idea of which in this case statutes were interesting to look at further. So I just give that a quick little shout out. So to wrap up our team's work over the past few weeks, the main takeaway was that we do see a lot of progress in this first 2 years, especially things that he promised, like the ROR becoming more equitable, especially for the first-degree felonies, the minimum bail being more equitable, first-degree felonies, trying to reduce the max sentencing and reform the certain statutes. But obviously, there's still room to improve We saw the greatest, I guess, improvement in the first degree felonies, but the other misdemeanors and graded felonies still have room to get more equitable. So if anyone else is interested in kind of tackling some of these questions, some things to think about would be the hidden factors driving these sorts of trends that we're observing, and also to be aware of the real life impact, like I kind of mentioned before, of these differences that might seem small could end up to thousands of dollars or days, months, years of a person's life. Some of the next steps that we didn't really have time to focus on, but we would be interested in exploring, would be to obviously keep track of how this is going and how he's handling ROR and these types of things, but also look at how he handled the COVID pandemic and all of the riots last year and criminal justice reform and so on. So to see if he kind of stuck his ground and stayed true to what he campaigned on. The other things is that it would be helpful to look at ethnicity level data so we can make more conclusions there. And going back to the statute slide, including arrest level data to tell us if the incidence is increasing or if he's just pursuing these more seriously compared to other crimes or reprioritizing. So that's about sums it up for our team, and we have a couple of us here that would be happy to take questions.
That is really awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much to the team and to you for presenting. Like, this is really fascinating to see. Want to open it up to chat for any questions, and I've seen we have a couple of questions from participants as well. So Joy, you want to go?
Sure. So I'm really grateful that you addressed the whole prosecutorial discretion question, because especially marijuana decriminalization, was a big move to get people from going to jail for simple possession, right? So I wonder if you considered and how hard do you think it would be to, when we're looking at bail, account for the newer distribution of offenses? Well, I mean, I guess you kind of do that. Maybe I answered my own question, because you do it by misdemeanor and felony level. But I wonder too, it would be interesting to see if there's vice misdemeanors like prostitution or drugs, something like that. And now that those are being taken a little bit out of the equation, I wonder if it would increase sort of the change in bail, because maybe what we're taking out are the sort of non-violent offenses and the sort of
the
vice
things that might drive that number down.
Yeah, I'm just
that
curious.
Would be interesting to look
at.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have looked into that specifically, but that's a good point.
Almost do a resampling, and just say, if we resampled, in either direction, what would we find?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And I think Jenna just raised her hand.
Yeah, hi. My name is Jenna. I work with WeClaim and with the JAT, and I had a question about the plot that was showing bail amounts by grade. I was just wondering what the sample sizes were like for the different grades, and also, so you're looking at before Krasner and after Krasner. So he was elected in 2017, I think, and I was just wondering if the before sections were using all of the data up until 2017.
Yeah, so the before was
am I trying
20...
to read here?
The before was 2016 through 2017, and then the after, I don't know if I still have control, but I think it was a couple slides before.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, the next.
Hold on, let me just give you control again. That might be easiest. There you go.
Okay, so you asked about the sample size. I don't remember offhand, but it wasn't, you know, we chose to look at the misdemeanors and felonies because there was a good sample size for these two. There were a couple of these grades that really didn't have any data for them, or it was only like in one race or the other. So we did kind of filter that out, but I don't have the exact numbers with me. I mean, if someone else wants to stall for me, I can probably find out.
I'm also curious about the date now that Jenna brings it up, because, you know, some cases, I mean, many cases, I'm sure, were started under a different prosecutor, and then, you know, Larry Krasner took office, but those judicial processes were already underway, right? So, like, did you put any sort of buffer? Was 2017 the buffer, I guess is what I'm asking, that would separate the before and the after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't work too much on the cleaning aspect of the script, so I don't know if anyone else from the team wants to chime in.
Yeah, I think, so we did not do any buffering. I guess I thought about it at first too, but I think it was just like the date that he took office, and then we take 2 years before that and 2 years after. But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to make that 1 year buffer and look at, say, 2015, 2016. My guess is that the data is going to be pretty similar to what we see now, but yeah, that's a good idea.
Or I guess maybe not a whole, it wouldn't be the same for every case, right? Because like shoplifting, you're in and out, you know? So is there a way to like look at all of the dates and say like, you know, when was, like, how long did this take? Did this case reach completion? You know, I don't know, just interesting, different ways to figure out like onset and result.
Yeah, in that case, I think the so let's say a case that lasts kind of, you know, very long time, I think then half of that case would be kind of put into the before and the other half would be in the after, given like the way that we have done it. But again, I agree. I think having a buffer that kind of account for those long cases would help.
All right, we have a couple of questions here from participants as well. Let me find them. So this is kind of related. So you looked at 2 years before and 2 years after. Did you also happen to plot or look at changes over time by year, for example, or by months, just to kind of look at the narrower trends? And what did you find if you did look at them?
The only thing that I remember us looking at year by year was like defendant age, whether they were male or female. That was something that June looked at. But that's something that we could probably easily do. So then I guess you would know or be able to capture the buffer maybe, or at least see it instead of just lumped into one category.
Yeah, I think June did the male defendant age and female defendant age, and we found that male defendant age actually increased throughout the last 20 years, which was interesting. Like we saw an increase of 2.2 years per decade for a male defendant, from like 27 to what is it, like 34? Yeah, 33, 34 over 20 years. And yeah, we talked about, you know, representing that trend, you know, using the x-axis this year for these misdemeanor and minimum bail. But we kind of stuck with this graph because it was just easier to show, you know, kind of the impact, I guess. Is essentially we have way too much information and we're trying to kind of condense it down a little bit here. But yeah, we can definitely kind of expand each of these facets out into x-axis and you know, of year, and then the y-axis would be the minimum bail for each of these groups.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always one of the big problems, right? You have too much information. How do you narrow it down to something that's useful? I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, another question here. How did you process the bail data to summarize at the docket level? There were so many entries per docket in the data set.
So I like I said, I didn't really work too much on the cleaning aspect of it, but I believe that our team just did the minimum and maximum of some of those like bail amounts per each docket. I don't know if Trang, you want to add on any more to that?
I can add on to that a bit.
Katrina,
So
yeah.
we also chose to look at minimum bail because we originally wanted to use like the first or last bail, but it was really difficult to determine which bail came first because the bail actions, the dates were floored to the first of the month. So if the bail changed in the first month, we didn't know which one came first. So we went with minimum bail. So there's one number per docket.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge with this data set. So I believe Jed would have access to more narrow or more detailed data, but that was unfortunately outside of the scope. But yeah.
However, I will jump in and say, shameless recruitment plug. If you were thinking to yourself, boy, I wish I had the full data with identifiers and the actual dates and the text that was identifying that talked about concurrent versus successive sentences, all that data that I wasn't able to clean in time and de-identify to get to you, we are definitely interested in having you join our ongoing efforts to analyze data like this. So sign up now. My email's in the chat.
And we'll make that available too if anyone's interested. One more. Did you consider plotting these minimum bail amounts using a statistical process control chart to observe changes over time?
Let me just try to find that one in the chat.
I'm not sure what statistical process control chart looks like. So
I can try to answer this because this was actually on the final exam I took today, but no, we did not consider this. And this could be interesting, I guess, if we did it for each month. So we could possibly do that. I don't necessarily know how it would look like with this data though. And I'm not an expert on this either, but I've just stepped in because I've heard of this concept.
I would love to know more about this concept. I actually don't really know much about it either. So maybe you can share some knowledge with us at some point. All right, so thank you so much, Team 3. This is amazing, and we can keep talking about it. I think there's so much information here. I think I saw the other slides that you guys had, and I know this is just scratching the surface of all the work that you did. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of the teams for doing all the hard work, and to Joy and her team from JAT for making this data set available to all of us to work on. I want to open it up now to everybody for open discussion. So we do have questions from participants in a slide here at the end. They're kind of ordered based on the number of votes that they received from other participants, but we don't have to stick to these questions. So I'm going to leave this slide up here, but I do want to open it up, and please feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, answer questions. Let's see how that goes. So if anyone would like to ask a question, go for it.
I suppose I can start. This is Alice. I think maybe what I would say is for the team 1, the dashboard that we created, I will just offer if team 2 or 3, you know, want to take a look and see where they could potentially add their analysis or help us as far as maybe we use some of the data that was cleaned by team 2 or team 3 to harmonize a bit. I would like to talk about that. Maybe we could continue the conversation in the Slack channel. I think that would probably be a good way to go. Think about what we could create as kind of a final product. So not really a question, just an item for discussion.
Yeah, and I think there will be reports created by the teams as well. So trying to kind of wrap all of these findings together into slightly more detailed, more space than what is available in 15 minutes. So I think we can coordinate some of those efforts and also bring them together into some final reports as well. All right, so let's see what other questions we have. So are the data transformations version controlled? So if we get updated data, would it be straightforward to reproduce the transformations behind the dashboard? I guess
not, yeah, in the amount of time we had to pull this together, no, but that's definitely the idea would be that if we have a standard data format so that like, you know, when new data becomes available, it can be processed quickly and then pushed into the dashboard in a kind of semi-automated way. That's not in place now. We had 6 weeks.
There wasn't that much time. 6 weeks is not really, it sounds like it's a lot of time, but it's not really a lot of time to get to know and become familiar with the data set and actually put something together and present. So it's a lot of work. And not a lot of time. But we can potentially work on that. Okay, question for Sybil. How did you add that GIF-like image to put into the Google slide and still to be able to look at each dot data information?
Yeah, so first I just made the plot using ggplotly. So I use Plotly, and then I have a GIF app. So I just recorded myself, screen recorded myself going ahead and looking at each of those dots, and it turns it into a GIF, and I just imported that image, inserted that image onto the slide.
That looked really, really fancy. I loved it. Okay, question to all of the teams about your process. So how are your teams structured? Did you use any agile methodologies or anything like that to keep the team on point? How did you structure your teams?
I can speak for team 1. There wasn't a lot of thought that went into it. I think we sort of played it by ear at first and just sort of saw, you know, who took on what work and how much time people could commit. So we were trying to be respectful of everyone's schedules and ability to commit and interests in what they wanted to do on this. I think for me, ultimately, I stepped in just to be the unofficial project manager because I like a lot of structure, and I was, you know, we had a lot of good ideas, and even in some of our earliest meetings, and I wanted us to keep track of those so that we could come back to them and keep a record of what was going on. But beyond that, there wasn't a lot more structure. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
I can add something for team 3. I think we kind of took the same approach, just kind of like looking at different data sets and, hey, I'm gonna dig into this, and yeah. But I think we also, like, the first 2 weeks were really, it took us a lot longer, I guess, to get everyone kind of on board. And like Jake did a great session on how to review pull requests, for example. So like we all learned so much just in the first couple weeks, and yeah, we took it from there. So
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, I was on team 2, and I would also say that we played it by the ear. We didn't have any like formal methodology, but we did have a division of labor. So as weeks went by, we had a clear idea of like who was to do which. So we had like one member, Eamon, he kind of led the discussions, and he suggested some models that we could do, and he cleaned up the data so that we could do all the modeling and the visualizations. And we had another member, Russ, he helped give a lot of theory in terms of how we can approach the problem, the question of judge harshness. And then yeah, in the end, I ended up doing the graphs, the box plots, and Shanti implemented the model.
So fairly organic. Just an add-on question here from the organizer standpoint, would it have helped for us to give you more structure from the organizer's point of view, or do you think this worked well?
I mean, I'm not familiar with Agile, but I would have loved to like have learned more about this. So yeah, I definitely would have been open to it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not familiar. What is Agile? Is it like an application or something?
It's a work process. It's an approach to structuring the work. I'm not an expert on it, but from what I understand, it's a way to structure the work in iterative processes or iterative steps. If anyone else knows more, please jump in.
It's popularized by software development, where you would organize collaborative projects like creating a piece of software into things like sprints, and there's a whole like a language of Agile.
Yeah, I know companies strive to become more agile because it helps pivot and focus on what's important and focus on small chunks of work at a time. But I think in data science, things tend to be less structured sometimes, depending on the work. All right, another question to all the teams. Did you work with a subject matter expert to help you with the work that you produced? Did you consult with outside sources? How did you go about learning more about the questions and the work?
I guess I would say for myself, Google has been very helpful. It's my best friend right now because there were just some things that I needed to research, and Google pretty much had all those answers for me.
I kind of want to take this opportunity to thank my teammate Katrina for essentially doing all the research on, the context and the promises that Krasner had made in the past and what has happened. And yeah, so Katrina, if you wanna jump in and kind of talk about your process through how you kind of pull all this together into a very nice Google Doc, and we can work based on that. Sorry for putting you on the spot, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, I wasn't pressing the right button to speak. Yeah, like someone mentioned before, I just Googled a bunch of things. I used to work in local government, so I think that helped me feel a little bit more comfortable looking, like for example, at an audit that was done about 10 years ago for the Philadelphia court systems, and then also at like a budget document where they were talking about some of their performance measures for bail. So I think that helped me as well.
Yeah, about these questions for team 2, we also feel talking to the subject matter expert helped a lot. We talked to a lawyer friend, and the conversation with him helped a lot to decide, for example, the unit of analysis, whether to go with offense level or dockets level because of the merge issue. Not knowledgeable about this area, initially we didn't even know whether merge could happen like only between offenses or across docket, for example, and talking with a subject matter expert helps too. And in our case for team 2, it helps to, talking with lawyer friends help to know which variables to put in as a covariate. For example, the choice of including court types that was decided based on the conversation. And actually the data set has 2 kind of court types, like court types and court office type. And we finally decided to only put one of them. Again, that's because of the conversation with the subject matter expert. So yeah, it's absolutely help a lot, yeah, for our work. Yeah.
Yeah, SMEs can be vital. Jayon, I see you saying something, wanting to say something?
No, I was just unmuting my mic for the next question because I saw that it was addressed to us.
Got it. All right, let's jump to the next question then. So were those harshest judges ones that only saw a few cases? Could we restrict to the most common judges?
Yeah, I did have this concern when I made the chart. So all the judges that were shown on the box plot and the bar charts are there because they issued rulings for that given charge at least 100 times. So I did set a threshold to make sure that what we see on the visualizations isn't just a few odd cases. I wanted to make sure that there would be an enough number of cases, in which case I decided would be 100, to make sure that there's enough data to represent the judge's sentencing pattern.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'd like to add from the perspective of the second approach. Yeah, I was also worried whether the result will be sensitive to the number of cases that a judge handle. But to my understanding, as with the random coefficient effects, it's actually the method it's robust to, if a cluster, a judge only have a few, even if it's only one, at least in one of the paper that we came across, it's supposed to be fine. If we chose another approach, for example, to extract a judge effects by using a fixed effect approach, in which we only use like a dummy for each judge, the result, to our understanding, would be sensitive to a few cases. And we briefly take a look at the harshest judges, who are they and how many cases that they kind of took care. For when we briefly look at that, the judges that's the harshest are not the one that handle only a few cases. So yeah.
Interesting. And then kind of similar or related, but does the judge data include information about the judge's age, gender, race, ethnicity, and number of years that they've been a judge? Or how did teams work to get this kind of information?
I can speak briefly just to the data itself. We have no demographic information about the judges. And one of the suggestions that we said was, there's 100 some odd of them. Like, look them up and Google them and see if they have a Wikipedia page, because that is not recorded in the docket information.
Yep, I do remember there was this challenge of getting this information from the web, because we didn't have it as part of the data set. Okay, so we still have a bunch of questions, but we are pretty much at the end of our schedule for today. But I do want to ask one last question, very broad, but kind of, what are your takeaways? What was really valuable? What did you learn from this Datathon? And what would you recommend it to others? What did you learn through this Datathon? I would love to hear that from everyone.
maybe I can kick it off. So I also wanted to say a thank you real quick to you, Carla, as one of the key organizers who put this together. You've been the driving force behind this whole having these datathons, which have been a great initiative from RLadies Philly. So thank you, Carla, for identifying this opportunity and connecting everybody here. Just one little thank you. I'll do a virtual round of applause for Carla. Thank you. And I will say then, as far as something that I learned from this, I actually learned a lot of skills, I think, just from the, it's always fun to work on a project where you can share code with other people. And it's not, oh, I'm going to get judged for this because it's my coworkers and they're going to think I'm dumb or something. And so looking at everybody else's code and how they approach things, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I definitely second that. Like learning different, I love learning a different code. It's so interesting to learn things, but I think just the general exposure was so huge for me. I'm used to working with biological expression data. So just learning how to deal with different types of data and different approaches, or even just completely different thought processes that are not basic science that's drilled into my head. The exposure to different ways to go about things, and also getting to know new people and different ideas, and that collaboration was just super valuable and fun.
I third that.
That just warms my heart. I love hearing about this. I learned so much through these efforts. It's just incredible. And we do try to make this very collaborative and really fun, so that there is no pressure, there is no judgment, and everyone can just have fun with it. So I hope that was the case for others. What do others think? What did others take away from this?
So I put this in chat, but I learned, how difficult it is to de-identify data and still leave it effective. It is tricky. I work in healthcare data, so this should not be surprising to me. But it's really hard to de-identify data. And there were a lot of downstream effects that people couldn't get access to the data because I didn't sort of think ahead of, oh, wait, if I de-identify this, then I'll muddy the waters with this particular question. So I'm really grateful for everyone's patience. And something that, this, I feel very emotional watching this tonight, because I feel like the things that you have uncovered and displayed and modeled and described are things that activists can use to change incarceration patterns. So your efforts can save people time in jail. And you'll never know, right? What your downstream effects did to a mom who can't afford bail and got picked up for shoplifting formula, or a kid that got picked up for weed, or just, you will never know, but that's out in the universe. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's, as data people, it's very hard for us to see the real impact of our work, but we do with these projects, or projects like these, where we work on real data and hope and help organizations that actually apply this to real world problems. We hope to get closer to that. I think that, and that means a lot for us to be able to do that. All right, so on that note, if there are no other questions, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who participated, everyone who supported, everyone who's here, and even just lurked or provided fun cat memes to the project. Huge thank you to everyone for helping us in this effort. So on that note, I will let everyone go and grab some dinner, and I'll see you hopefully at one of our next events. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.